So the bug was drawn between 1997 and 2000, sometime in that period, by my daughter Catherine when she was between 8 and 10 years old. I don't remember this particular bug, but my daughter Catherine drew that during a Death March project, which I hope to talk a little bit about today. Maybe actually I'll start with that, and I'll tell you the story of the bug and why it relates to value sync. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
I love that. You know, people asking questions while you're talking instead of waiting to the end. It's like we planned this, right? I urge you all to interrupt me, throw rocks at me. I come from a rather rugged Canadian culture, and I feel very comfortable hanging out in Tallinn, in the different clubs, bars, and restaurants. People have been very talkative, and yet when speakers speak, I don't hear them talking. I say, what's going on here? So please, 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 I encourage you to ask questions as we go. If you do that, I'll be able to steer my talk in a direction that maybe is a little bit useful for you, or at the very least practical for you. And if you don't, we may have a little Q&A period towards the end, but I'm hoping to get questions on the fly as we go. Is that okay? You comfortable with that? No? No, I understand why you're here. I understand. I know why you're here. I read the program. I double-checked, and just 2 seconds before this talk, I checked the program. And right after this talk, there's a party with drinks. So I get to lead into the party with drinks. So you just want to get to the party, and this is the closest you can get to the party. So we start with a story. The campfire is, for me, a beautiful metaphor for a story. I'll share with you probably 3 or 4 stories in this. If anyone's been watching me talk earlier this week, I tell stories all the time, but I try to tell stories to try to make a point. So this is a story about value sync, and it's about my bug picture. I was the director of software engineering. It was November. My boss, the president of the company, comes into my office. Rob, we have a Death March project that's got to be deployed completely by April. The team's been working on it for a long time in a company we had acquired. So it wasn't my team, it was an acquisition. I inherited this team sort of indirectly. My testing group was in it. I had a huge, beautiful, wonderful testing team. I had programmers working with me. I had doctors. I had medical people. It was a medical software company. And my boss wanted me to fix this Death March project. It was apparently getting nowhere. So I went and I took a look. What the heck is this project? I don't know. It was called Rendezvous. The company we bought was called ABH. They had over 200 customers in Quebec, Canada, near where I lived, near where we were. We had acquired the company to acquire the 200 customers to get the channel. Now, the next generation of the product, which was this Death March project, the next generation was supposed to be basically merging all the features and stuff of all the different market. And I found out that instead of having one product with 200 customers, that the customer, our ABH guys, actually had 200 products for 200 customers. Every customer had their own private code base. Did you ever see that? You ever hear of this? This is a really weird model, but they were making tons of money. Because it's on video, I resist saying they made shitloads of money, but they made tons of money. And the amount of money they made with this was fantastic because they were selling time and material. They weren't selling products. So they basically got customer wants a feature, yes sir, the programmers, they go out. They put on their shiny armor. They get on these white horses and they gallop out to the customer and they go and they code like the wind and they save the day and they go with the girl and they're the heroes into the sunset. And they charge $270 an hour. The gold, they take the gold. And this is what they did, and they did it well. I don't want to criticize that, but I can make it farcical. But I want to talk about value and context, so I'm trying to give you a presentation of our starting point. Projects, not products. 200. They decided to take a very simple requirement-driven approach to develop the next-gen product. And the simple requirements were so easy to state. Just take every feature from every customer and merge them together. and make a build. It was almost, we can automatically do it with source control systems. It's easy, right? It's easy. They couldn't get a stable build. I couldn't see a feature running unless they went onto the developer's desktop and looked at their private IDE. Couldn't merge, couldn't integrate. Whenever they gave something to my testing team, it was so unstable, it demoralized my testing team. My testing team was used to working with mature environments, mature development process. We were very, very good. This team was crap. It was awful. I guess it wasn't their fault. They made lots of money, and if that was the goal, they had achieved it. But they flim-flammed our shareholders. They flim-flammed our shareholders because we bought them thinking they had 200 customers for one product, not 200 customers with 200 code bases, right? So how do you solve this problem? What do you do? They have, if you look at the product, hundreds and hundreds of menus, dialogues, controls, all over the place. And you're looking at all this stuff and all this crap, and they're trying to get it all working and basically doing it requirement by requirement by requirement. So I looked at this, and I had to do a couple of drastic things. One is I really helped the dev lead get a new job. Part of the culture of software engineering in Canada. We don't fire people, we help them get a new job. He got a job at a project company, not a product company, where he kicked butt. He's good at that project stuff, not the product stuff. I put in a product guy who I had worked with before, I trusted a lot, who knew nothing about the domain, but a lot about managing developers. I basically then started doing something that I think that I want to urge you to do. I tried to learn about something. So I went and I knocked on doors. I went, door, knock, 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 door, knock, knock, knock. And whose doors was I knocking on? I was going around medical clinics all around eastern Quebec, almost all 200 of them, knock, 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 talking to the customers and asking them some really cool questions like, hey, what do you do? Hey, what do you do? Who's the user and what do they do? What job do you do? I didn't ask them, how do you use our software? I asked them, what do you do? Which our software might fit into. And after this really beautiful and comprehensive analysis, and I storyboarded things, and I did a great job, I identified a beautiful collection of usage scenarios. We had collected exactly 27 usage scenarios. Hundreds of menus and dialogues and controls. 27 usage scenarios. Hundreds of features. Very reasonable number of things people do with the product. I set up an independent testing team. And this was, by the way, the correct agile thing to do, just to let you know. This is agile with independent testing. It was the right thing to do. I brought in one tester. One. That's how many testers I needed to solve this problem. One. His name was George Knopfel. He was a brilliant context-driven tester in the Montreal area. You'd love to work with him. He's one of my heroes in the field. He's just fantastic, brilliant tester. I brought him in. I hired a few, maybe 12, customer subject matter experts. I had, by the time I was finished knocking on those doors, met a lot of them. I knew a lot of people, and I found some people who were really what I would say is domain experts, gurus, subject matter experts, a dozen of them. George Knopfel, a dozen people. I got my fantastic testing team to set up test environments, test labs, test data. This was medical stuff. It had to be sanitized, it had to be cleaned, it had to be private, it had to be regulated, all beautiful stuff. I asked the development team, give me a build every Thursday at 12. Give me it at Thursday at noon so that I would have it by Friday at 5. Good. I like that. And that's true, though. I really did. And then George and his gang would spend the weekend testing it by walking through usage scenarios from beginning to end, following storyboards. So it's a sort of scripted testing, but it was beautiful. And the domain experts were the ones doing it, using clean data from a real professional testing environment. They found lots of bugs, and the bugs that they found were always bugs that stopped users from doing their job. So there were almost always bugs that we had to fix. I asked the development team to focus on fixing those bugs. Don't even add or change features, just focus on that. We continued on that vein from the end of November until March. We converged the project. We had a product that we can do a month of beta testing with, all of March. We were able to deploy the Death March project. The Death March project in April, ahead of the time. Wish we would have been penalized and all the doctors would have had to give back government grant money that they had received. And surely everyone would have been fired and all their jobs been lost. And the testing was the hero of the project. And the scenarios was the way we could measure our progress. What task can a user do now? And we weren't doing something silly and abstract like story points and stuff like that. We were really talking about a list. It was a small list. I could give you the list. Here's the 16 that work now. Here's the ones that we don't know. It was so clear that everybody could understand it. And we really were engaged. And you wouldn't believe how easy it was for me to get a PO approved if I needed to have an expense or a tool, because it was such a death march project that people facilitated it. So that's, I guess, my first story about value sync. Now, if we dissect that story, and it relates to the book, by the way, just to give you the book part of it. I'm a family person. I have 3 kids, and now I have 3 grandkids too. So they call me Grandpa. For some reason in India, they call me Grandpa, and I always thought that was a piece of respect, and now I just found out this week that they're actually insulting me. Grandpa Rob, Grandpa. Okay, so I'm a family guy. I spend as much time with my family, just cool things with my family, and during this period, I had to work 7 days a week. And it's my ethic that if I have teams of people working, I have to work. And I'm not just a manager who goes away and delegates and go. I really got involved. And so what I would do is I'd bring my kids with me on weekends. And my daughter, Catherine, started drawing, so 10-year-old, right? Started drawing pictures on whiteboards of bugs. And after a few weeks, when we came back the next weekend, some of the pictures were still there. In fact, some of the people who worked in the company were blocking off the boards and wanted her to draw more pictures. So I started giving her themes of pictures. And by the end of the project, and when we released it, we had finished writing as a family project. It's tearful for this. I Am a Bug was written that way. During a death march project, keep your family together, right? Value sync. Don't give up. There's always a way. There's always another way. The key element for me of value sync in that story was quality. I've learned that my personal opinion about quality doesn't matter. My personal opinion about quality doesn't matter. What matters is the opinion about quality of my stakeholders. What do they care about? In this case, what mattered was a view of quality, which I would call suitability to purpose. There's many views of quality. I've collected over 15. 3 main areas. Conformance to requirements. Anybody? Quality, conformance to requirements. Phil Crosby, ISO 9000, ISTQB. There's an ISO standard that's coming out that does that too. 20-something. Second one, Joseph Duran, Quality Control Handbook, 1950. Quality is suitability to purpose. Third one, yeah, go ahead.
What is ISTQB?
I have an answer for that, right? So I comes after H and is followed by J. S is after R and before T.
I think that's quite bad.
Oh, that's good. I like that. I'm not going to start teasing qualification boards, but it's a funny question. Everybody has different views of what quality is. Your stakeholders is the one that I care about. And I hunt down and I try to find it. Is it conformance to requirements? If that's true, then my job becomes one of hunting for implicit requirements. I don't care what's written down, I care what's required. If it's value to stakeholders, that's another definition, that's Jerry Weinberg's definition. Context-driven testers pray to that definition. Quality is value to stakeholders. If that's the case, who are the stakeholders and what do they value? Different things at different times. Value, time variant, stakeholder variant. Stakeholders come and go. And the other one, suitability to purpose. Ask the user, can the user do their job with your software? Who is the user? What is their job? Ask not what the software does for the user. Ask what the user does with the software. Different views of quality. Drive different types of testing. Value can be viewed in many different ways. We have physical value. Physical value, that pile of gold is physical value. We have emotional value. That good feeling I get when I have my kids with me. That positiveness, that happiness. Are we happy? Are you happy? I know you will be happy at 6 p.m. And then there's ethics. I believe software testing, I like to say this out loud in front of groups of people at wonderful communities like this. I believe software testing is about social responsibility, and I believe we have some of the most beautiful and important jobs and professional careers in the world. We are protecting the world. We are the shield. We are that thin veil from all that crappy software and their lives. How many of you have software or people you know who have software that their life depends on? In the last 5 years, almost 100% of the people I know can answer that question true. How much of that software is written in a garage and not tested? A remarkably lot of it. So who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders are maybe people who derive value from our work, offer value to our work, or otherwise somehow support our ability to derive or offer value. How do you find stakeholders? This is an interesting question. And I unfortunately run into a lot of what I call a purely technical hired gun contract testers. Are there any of those here? Real superstar contract testers? You're a hired gun, you go there, you test, you leave, you don't care about anything. Do you care who the stakeholders are? I urge every tester on every team, on every project, everywhere, to look out for and identify and know who the stakeholders are, at least at different times. I don't say you have to be their buddies or their friends, but it's important, I think, for you to know what they value and what they care about, at least somehow. So maybe we can attract them. This is the honeypot approach. You take a jar of honey, put it in the middle of the room, and all the stakeholders come, except it works better with red wine, maybe good cheese, you know, what is it, French cheese or Danish cheese, I'm not sure which type, but one of the two. So attracting them. Make it compelling that they come and talk to you. Make your work visible, even to people you don't know care. But maybe my favorite way is that I'm walking down the hall, and I trip and I fall. And I'm flat on the floor, and I say, aha, I found a stakeholder. The stakeholder is that person who, while I was walking by, put their leg out and I tripped over it. That stakeholder is someone who's impeding my success. What do you want me to do? You want me to get mad because I can't get my purchase request done, that the developers don't talk to me, that the support department gives me a hard time, that I can't get my database license server working? All the people who are blocking me to achieve my success, all these impediments, that's stakeholders. Somewhere behind them, maybe they're not, maybe there's someone behind them. There's a stakeholder who I need to offer value to or derive value from or get them to support my value. And if they don't buy into it, all they're going to do is block me, and I don't know who they are. So how do you find them? You trip over them. You run into them. They're that wall that's blocking you from your success. And of course, there's the sponsors are the guys who pay your check. I think talk to the guy who's paying you is a good one too. What do they value? Stakeholders value different things. The expression that I use, and this is a cultural American, I guess, expression, but I'm from Canada, so we're allowed to use them liberally. Different strokes for different folks in different contexts. They value different things at different times. Biggest mistake I see in testing projects is people make things called test plans, and then they follow test plans, and they don't change test plans. And I'm going to say, hey, there's many reasons to change test plans, but for me, one of the most important one is if something changes from the point of view of what stakeholders value during the project. This is dynamic, not static. This is not something that's always the same because of something that I will call context. The word context, I've seen it all over this conference, and I'm happy to see it all over this conference. I'm delighted, I'm honored. People consider me a context-driven thinker or a context-driven tester. I don't claim to be a thought leader, but I've been doing this for an awfully long time. And I've seen a lot of things work and screw up. And maybe one of the things that I've seen screw up the most is people forget to consider the different factors that influence the decision-making on their projects. Context drivers, factors that influence decision-making on your projects, primarily about requirements, bugs, and testing. If a factor related to that changes, you want to review carefully your testing goals and plans. So context, I've studied it a bit. I've identified 4 areas of context that I think are very interesting and important, but I don't want to generalize. There's a lot more areas, I'm sure. Business, technology, organization, and the last one, which isn't in my slide, is cultural. I don't understand cultural context factors, but they kick me in the butt all the time. If anybody here understands cultural context factors and how that influences testing, please publish papers, please share experience reports, please, please, please. Our community really needs to learn more and more about that, especially as we're doing international collaboration to get complex software projects done. So I'm urging you to tell me how cultural factors work. I've seen them. I know how it doesn't work. Mind map about factors, I don't want to go into it too deep, not in this little presentation. But if you want access to my slides and extra materials on this, just send me an email after the conference or after this talk and ask me for a link to a Dropbox, and I'll send you tons and tons of examples and case studies that support this, included documented case studies. All my case studies are actually documented, sanitized to protect the innocents. So I want to share with you examples of how these things matter. I jokingly talk, and I spent the JIT course. Anyone at the JIT course with me yesterday? I didn't scare you all away. I talk about context factors related to business market focus, and I give the example of the Apple iPhone 4, which was released, and there was a bug considered by CNN as the worst technical bug in the year 2010, that you could not make voice phone calls with the phone on the world's biggest telecom network. I thought that was cool. I thought that was an interesting bug to have in a commercial product. Apple that year made net profit of $29 billion. They made over 2 orders of magnitude more than the aggregate amount of gold that all the pharaohs in Egypt ever had. And I know, I checked that. It's an amazing fact. I did this in South Africa. They're paranoid about gold down there, so I did all this research about gold. And at the same time, BlackBerry released a phone called the Bold, if you've ever heard of the BlackBerry Bold. The BlackBerry Bold, if it had a bug like that, would have bankrupted RIM. Apple made more money than they ever. They doubled their profit from the previous year by releasing a phone that couldn't make phone calls. Now, you tell me, is this good or bad? I'm saying that's brilliant. And I talked to technical testing people and said, oh yeah, they knew there were problems in that area. They never dived in deep about them, but they knew there were problems in that area. It's called Antenna Gate. If you Google Antenna Gate, you get the whole story. It's an amazing story of denial and then evidence and this and that. And the fact of the matter is that they didn't care because it didn't matter. Because of a context factor called market lifecycle. And Apple was focusing their testing on people who were early adopters or innovators who didn't care about voice phone calls. They wanted to use Twitter, FaceTime, and basically IP protocols, tools. Otherwise, I know in this country I have to say it's like Skype, but it wasn't Apple, so it was the FaceTime stuff. Now, they sell that. They didn't sell this product to banks. They didn't sell it to insurance companies. I don't think they still sell their phones to big corporate customers. They're a consumer company with consumer phones. BlackBerry RIM sells to corporate companies, and they care about the market focus of late majority and laggards. Late majority and laggards. Their customers care a lot about regression testing, backwards compatibility, old message, voice, all that stuff. So, the exact same requirements. If you look at the iPhone 4 and the BlackBerry Bold from a requirement perspective, they're almost bang smack identical. The design is totally different, but the requirements are identical, and yet the focus and importance of testing dramatically different for the same exact requirements. And it's for me, it's an example of context factors. Know context factors and watch for changing context factors. Context factors, some of them are static, they don't change. Some of them are dynamic, they do change. And some of them, this is the scary bit, some of them are revealed. You discover them. The smoke and the fog clears around them, and there's a context factor that you didn't know was there and mattered. And once you know it, you can leverage it. And that's what context-driven testing is all about, is identifying new ones and then taking advantage of it dynamically on the fly. Don't get married to the ones you discovered at the beginning. Context is alive, so this is it. It's alive! What I want to do when I'm worried about context is identify sources of context. A little case study about a source of context I identified. myvirtualmodel.com, backend software for landsend.com. We're having a meeting, major release coming out in 2 or 3 days. All of a sudden, into the room comes a person I've never seen before, and he's holding a piece of paper and a pencil, and he's going clack, 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 clack. It's like a clipboard. And he said, drop everything. Here's a list of things on his clipboard. Here's a list of things to do. There were 17 or 19, some prime number under 20, things to do. He said, drop everything you're doing, do these things, and then ship the software. I don't care what you say. So I, of course, said, who the hell are you? Excuse me, on video there. Who the heck are you? And he basically, it turned out, was the president of the company. He was the president of the company. He was signing my checks. I was a consultant who was trying to make a living, and I had never met or talked to this guy in my life. But he was probably one of the most important stakeholders in the company. And I couldn't believe this. I found that very aggressive behavior for a president, but what do you think I did? I took his list, I did what was marked, and I shipped the product. And I cashed my consulting check. And I had discovered an important context driver, the president. But it was also a good thing, not a bad thing, because what I found out was that the president did something beautiful. And every week he called and had conference calls with every one of his major customers, every one of them about upcoming work. And this particular week, his call was with Land's End about the features and the new thing. And the list he gave us was actually Land's End's checklist that they cared about. And he knew nothing about software engineering or decision making. So what we did was we involved him a little bit in the process, and we made a point of the product manager jamming with him before and after calls and actively participating in calls when it was related to an imminent product release. So this actually worked out pretty good, but that's what I want to call is identifying a source of context that helped us do kick-ass work, but was very painful to discover. I'm always on the lookout. So this is, once I find them, I go into active listening. Because just because I found a source doesn't mean they're going to go tell me, because they don't, I was going to say give a shit, but they don't care about my job. That's the last time I used that joke. No more. Save it for the next conference. What I basically learned here was that I have to listen to it. No one's job is to tell me what I need to know. No one's job is to tell you what you need to know. They know it. You know they know it. You have to learn how to do it. You have to get it. You have to hunt it. You have to dig it out. Active listening, not passive stuff. Don't wait for a freaking status report to say, hey, a context factor's changed. Do what I do. Walk in the morning, open the door and say, are we in the same business today? And do that every day and forever and for always. Adapt when it changes. Interesting things about context. We should ask the question, how does software react to changing contexts? And how does context react to changing software? We do influence it. We do influence it. And we should look carefully. When a context factor changes, we should adapt our testing. And I can be very specific about how. What I like to do is I like to change the decision-making workflow around projects if a context factor changes. Reorganize, refocus my work. I have specific examples of that if you're interested in the Dropbox. I'm concerned about a mistake I made, and I spent a good part of my career managing the large development teams, and I was stupid. And I used to say things like, it's very important for us to develop reusable code. So I think this is the biggest mistake of any software engineering manager between 1979 and 2005, to make it a primary goal to have reusability in code, and also, by the way, reusability in testing and reusability in any software engineering artifact, because we were trying to reuse a frickin' artifact, but we were reusing it out of context. What was good enough in one context is irrelevant in another context often, and it's more often than not. Today, this has now become a sloppy style of testing and programming, and I call it cut and paste development. And what people do is they look, do I have something similar that I've done before? Can I find something on internet? And then you copy it into the clipboard. And it's in your clipboard. And you take it, and you paste it into your environment, and you make the minimum changes to get it running, and we're there, voila! We've reused code, but we've ignored context. Reuse out of context is dangerous. What was good enough in one context may be almost irrelevant in another context. In software, the bugs that were acceptable in one context may be life critical and stuff like that in other ones. So we want to remember to be careful about inheriting context-dependent decisions when we do reuse of code or testing. Stakeholders also fade in and fade out. So I think we have a job for them to identify them and then to sort of help them walk their path that's relevant, help them do their jobs, and use non-intrusive mechanisms. to make sure that we hear them and are heard by them. In other words, we don't want to interfere with their job. We don't want to create activities that slow them down. So watch what they do and sort of tag something on there. Did you ever see the beautiful movie Office Space? Okay, what I recommend you do is you get a red stapler and you put a new cover sheet on your TPS report. And then the cover sheet includes the testing. TPS stands for, it's an IEEE 829 standard, Test Procedure Specification. In case you're interested. If anyone knows the movie, you find that funny. I know you don't find it funny, and you're not going to laugh anyhow. So the only type of laughing you're going to do is when I make self-deprecating humor about me dying. I find people in Estonia find that very funny. Yesterday I talked for an hour about funny things about me dying, and everyone was in stitches about it. Interesting country. Okay, so stuff stakeholders value. Material stuff, emotive stuff, and community stuff. This morning I went to a talk about community building, a company that's building community stuff. Really interesting stuff. Stakeholders value different things, behaviors, commitments. Most of all, what I've learned is people value consistency. So if you're flip-flopping all over the place or it appears inconsistent, you lose your credibility. It's interesting when you're looking at value, you might ask the question, why does someone ask you to test? Why test? Are you a gatekeeper? Are you the custodian of quality? Are you the guardian that's blocking the door, that's saying, nothing shall cross through this portal unless I say I am the owner of value and quality and I make the decision and you can't ship it otherwise? Or do we step out? Do we step out of that? And do we suggest things like, I don't know, maybe we're information provider, or maybe we're like the headlights of a project, or something like that. So there's different reasons to test. And what I found is that we can have on the same project multiple conflicting visions, and it still works. Multiple different reasons for testing. If you look at regulatory compliance testing, you're going to see projects where people have certain things that they really have to do that are regulatory compliant, and that would give you one sort of purpose of testing, but at the same time, you want to shake down bugs and problems and learn about issues that might happen when people use the software. They're two different reasons for testing on the same project. We don't have to manage those things the same. We want to help stakeholders see. This is like I think one way to really get in value sync is to try to speak in the stakeholders' language. You know this type of stuff, right? I don't have to give you speeches about that. But looking at this, we're the headlights seeing through the fog and want to make things visible so stakeholders can deal with it. Unfortunately, some stakeholders have this ambition that they want to pull your arm out if something goes wrong, just like a Wookiee in Star Wars. You've heard of Star Wars, please? Please. Do you remember the quote, "Let the Wookiee win"? No? Never heard of that? No. There was 3D chess, the original Star Wars movie, which was movie number 4, I think. And the first one was 4, A New Hope, right? That's what they called it, A New Hope. And the robot is playing chess with the Wookiee, who's a big hairy monster, and the Wookiee basically doesn't like a move and is going to pull out the arm of the robot. And Han Solo says, no, let the Wookiee win. That's the best strategy. And I think we should adopt that strategy in testing. If you identify a stakeholder who's a Wookiee, you can tell they're big, hairy, ugly monsters that smell bad and breathe out steam all the time, even when it's not cold. And then what? Even when it's not cold. And then what you do is get them to buy into your workflows and things before the project starts, before there's a crisis. And then what I like to do is turn the problem, instead of disagreeing with the stakeholder, what I want to do is I want to basically get them to sort of understand things. And when I find multiple stakeholders who have different opinions, I want to derive value from conflicts. And I love that. When I have multiple stakeholders have different opinions, that gives me a chance to change things. So when I find that, I don't look at that as an impediment. I look at that as an opportunity to really clean things up. And maybe it restructures projects sometimes, rescopes things, changes things. Value sync is about having common understandings, shared belief, but most of all, it's about purposeful work. Purposeful work. Think about purposeful work. Purposeful testing. On time, on quality, and on budget are meaningless concepts unless you're on purpose. That's what I've learned. That's the blood, sweat, and tears That's thousands and thousands of bugs. That's hundreds of product releases. That's, I believe, as close to truth as I can come in this talk. You're busting your butt, right? Are we on time? You're busting your butt. What is quality? What is good enough? You're busting your butt. Are we on budget? Do we have the money to pay the people? What can we afford? But basically, if you're not on purpose, if you're testing things that don't relate to what people value, you may be sort of throwing yourself. So I would start with purpose. I would start with that big why. That's the first question. Why are we doing this? Why are we testing it? Sometimes, and there's a guy called Henrik Anderson from a company called the House of something, the Lego House, the House of Test, right? That's them? Do you hear them? No, Henrik? Anyone know Henrik? Henrik, he's not here. He should be here. He should pay double, but anyhow. What Henrik did with me is we had a fight at Let's Test 2 years ago, and we disagreed. And I was talking about objectivity and subjectivity, and we sort of said, well, rather than disagree, let's use this conflict to do something constructive. And we worked with a third party and wrote an article about subjective and objective test information and how to deal with it. And it became it's quite beautiful actually, but we basically really found out that we sort of agreed with each other, but we had a lot of different ways that we've experienced it. What's important for me is I think that both objectivity in testing and subjectivity is important, okay? So both are important. And both have different roles to play here. Objectivity, okay, so we're on mission, provide massive objective information about products and projects, okay, that's cool. But what about subjective stuff? Subjective stuff is your frickin' opinion. I want your opinion. You are a testing professional. What's your opinion of this product? One example, beautiful example, context-driven example from a customer of mine in Toronto, Canada. They do status reports weekly about beautiful information about exploratory testing. That's really meaningful. They have about 10 tabs of information in a spreadsheet. It's really cool. One of them talks about what claims marketing makes and what we know about them. And one of them is a subjective list of the top 10 things a critic would say, or the top 10 things a customer would say if we shipped the product now. I did detailed task analysis at company. Every single person I talked to who read that report, that's the first tab they read, and most people that was the only tab they read. The subjective opinion of the test lead. And it was brilliant. It was really helping people. And of course the test lead had a lot of responsibility on that, but they knew it was the opinion. So learning what stakeholders value, I already mentioned we have to do active listening, but don't be afraid to ask people, figure out ways to ask them, watch for inconsistencies in their answers, but most of all, observe what they do. You learn what stakeholders value by observing how they make decisions in difficult times. What bugs did they accept? What trade-offs did they make? Who did they fire? These are things that will tell you a lot about what the stakeholders value. We're good at measuring, assessing, learning. I hope you realize testing is about learning. We're being paid to learn. It's really cool. Value sync is about knowing what matters, understanding why. It's not just knowing what matters, it's understanding why. Case in point, university in Northern Alberta. Key stakeholder, over half the projects. All I care about is on-time delivery, that's all. Nothing else matters. Ship it on time, that's all that matters. Guy's name is John. Everyone was so freaking scared of him, they wouldn't talk to him. And people were panicking and coding and testing features to hit this date, and it was sloppy development and sloppy testing, by the way. You'd be embarrassed by some of the stuff they were doing. But the stakeholder was clear, right? They valued on-time delivery. What the mistake was, is the team didn't try to understand why. Luckily, some very wise person hired me to do a deep software engineering analysis, a task analysis of this place. And I spent a good day with John asking him why, every single way I could think of. Every single way I could think of. And he was very proud because he liked the fact that someone cared about him and why he made decisions and stuff. And it worked out that they were in an environment which was government funded. When someone wanted a project to start, they would go to the Government of Canada and say, hello, Government of Canada, we need $250 million to do this project. And the government of Canada would go and say, no, we're not going to give you $250 million. Are you nuts? No, we'll give you, or not going to give you $250,000. We're going to give you $30,000. And so what do you think the university said? No, we're not going to take your $30,000? I said, okay, thank you. Give me the $30,000. So now immediately, they're setting themselves up to fail. They have a budget of less than 1/5 or 1/2 or whatever it is of what they really need to do the project. It's a failure just by accepting the money. In Canada, we have accountability in public institutions for public spending, and the universities are public, so it's not private, it's government funded from our tax money. It's not free, but it's from our tax money. And there's high accountability. So if someone misspends and misappropriates public funds, they get, not only they get in jail, they get fired, in jail, everything. And what John was doing was making sure that on these stupid projects where people had under budget projects going on, that the money was taken from the right funding so they weren't violating these heavy laws about use of public funds. And he needed the release date to be prescribed so that he could take money out of the maintenance and ongoing maintenance fund instead of the specific product development fund, which had different regulations around it. And once we understood this, once I understood that, I took it and I said, hey, we got to change how we develop software completely. And instead of doing the style of development they were doing, come up with an incremental method where you start with install programs, patchers, data conversion, and then you add features so that when that date comes, at least you've got something that's working that you can deploy and maintain instead of having everyone doing crappy software engineering work. Understand why. Understand why. And share that. Don't keep it private. Communicate it. What if you don't have value sync? This I learned from James Bach. Walk away. Are you prepared to walk away? Are you prepared to make job-threatening decisions? Well, sometimes in testing, if there's no value sync, that's maybe the right thing to do. I've seen people do it. It's not always the right thing. I prefer to try other things, like, for example, finding a common grounds and then trying to build on what we do share in values, because I think most people I work with are actually reasonable somewhere, but they're just in the heat of a crisis are focusing on the wrong thing or different things. Some people have a purely economic focus where they look at effort done and to go, people committing on spending money. And I would ask the question, I would say, okay, maybe what we should do if we have a purely economic focus is stop playing these squeeze play games with software testing and sort of take things from people and say, hey, the developers gave it to us late, so we have less time to test, but the data's fixed, and we squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And instead, provide the management with information always about saying, hey, what's the best build today? If I had to ship now, what could I ship? And suddenly, instead of you telling them we don't have enough time to test, you're always telling them, well, if you ship this, this is the consequences. And people start making a trade-off. In North America, we teach our children about this in a TV show called Sesame Street. Has anyone ever seen Sesame Street? So what we do is we teach people how to do what's called an affinity analysis in Sesame Street. And the way it goes is this, is basically we show a kid 4 objects and we teach them 2 songs. So this is one of the songs, and I'm not a good singer, but one of the songs goes like this. One of these things is not like the other. You know that song? So some people know that. And you try to teach them to identify the difference. And then the other song for the same type of game is 3 of these things belong together. 3 of these things belong together. 3 of these things are kind of the same, kind of the same. Can you guess which things belong together before we finish the game? And that's basically what you're teaching kids to do is an affinity analysis. And what we want to do is when we're looking at testing here and shipping things, give people information about if I shipped it now and have them do an affinity analysis. And now it's about trade-offs between bills rather than squeeze plays on testing. And this economic focus can actually work to your advantage. There's time focus too. Here we maybe want to make trade-offs with workflows that slow us down and difficult problems with debt. You've heard of testing debt. This is coming up more and more. Were there any talks on testing debt in this conference? It comes up a lot. People make expedient trade-offs. We don't have time to build a test automation framework, so we will do a ton of scripted testing manually, and maybe 5 years from now, we'll do that automation stuff. And so what happens, your product gets polluted with regression bugs, so you end up focusing on maintainability instead of new features. Value sync leads to, if we play this right, I think, and I urge you all to look for this, respect. I don't get no respect. Well, I want to get respect if I'm in sync with the values of my stakeholders on a project, the values of my customer, the values of my team, the values of the developer, and they're all different. I can respect them, and they can start maybe respecting me. I can be held in esteem, which I like, and I can start thriving for achieving maybe some reasonable ideals. I'll have a platform maybe to be heard, and one of the things I love the most is testing, driving action. And we have an opportunity today in Agile planning meetings, in Scrum right now. You could go in there and you can basically actively participate. Anyone in this room, you have testing skills, you have testing knowledge, participate in technical design decisions, in Agile planning meetings, actively participate, and drive the decision based on your knowledge of what the frick can go wrong. What can go wrong? What can screw up? What can fail? Or what's that word there, the IS something is, technical risk. What can go wrong? We can drive action. We don't have to sort of sit in the back seat and wait. We can also give people, heads up about impending danger and cautionary indicators. I think because we know what they care about and we know what to watch. We can focus our testing ideas on what matters. If we know what people value, we can discover what people matters, and we can maybe avoid distractors. And I'm afraid that people interpret me as saying deliberately have intentional blindness. That's not true. What I'm talking about is scoping. I want to scope where I'm looking for problems with this. If I know what people care about, I'm going to scope it on what people care about a lot, at least. It's not to avoid looking for things that are side effects. And then the streamline information sharing, because I know what people value. I don't have to make every report HP Mercury can spit out just because the report can be there. I just focus on those few things that the stakeholder actually values. Testing, I think, can be brought down to three things, right? It's about people, it's about value, and on the bottom here, it's about the occasional bug, at least that one, the occasional bug. This is time for me to, I have 6 minutes on the clock there. Only 2 or 3 little questions came up. I have a nice case study on value sync, which I'll put in the Dropbox. I'll give you a 65-second summary of it. But this is a fully sanitized example of one of the most horrific projects I was ever involved in. And it was solved with value sync on a lot of fronts. We had developed a product. It was an antivirus product. A salesman went and took a CD from a desk of someone in the development team and gave it to a technician at the customer. This was not tested. This was just some hack intermediate build or something. There was no way that build had any credibility. It was full of missing. It was just an intermediate build on a desk. The salesman had some sort of sales reason to show it to the technical guy. So the technical guy looked at it. Then, unknown to us, they hired a company, which I challenged the ethics of this. They hired a company in the States that basically said, okay, we'll test this. There were people who didn't want them to do business with us, and so we're trying to create and sabotage our project. This testing team was supposed to be professional testers. Actually, what they did, I don't really call it testing, I call it sabotage. But what they did is they didn't really test it. What they did is they got 200 customers, 200 users. They sent copies of the CD to these users. They asked the people to try to use it in their home environment without any testing experience, whatever, just regular consumers. And what they did was that they collected all the help desk calls, aggregated them, exaggerated them, and duplicated them. So in other words, if everybody said, hey, there's a feature missing, we had 200 bugs that were all different about features missing. So we had something on the order of 9,000 problems that were identified there. This freaked out the executive of our customer who basically tried to block a $4.3 million deal. I came in. Rob gets these crazy projects, right? I came in. I had to figure out how to do this. How can you test your way out of this, Rob? Value sync. Value sync. What do they value? And I found out the story. Eventually, I found out about the salesman. I couldn't believe it. But he did this with a good intent. There was, good intentions everywhere. I talked to people. I got permission to talk to the highest levels of executive of our customer, and I found out what they valued was, and what they knew and understood of testing was independent test labs in telecommunication industry. and they knew the concept of independent test labs and knew how that worked, and they thought that this report looked like it was an independent test lab. So I showed them that it was independent testing, but it wasn't in a controlled environment, and they sort of caught that, and we agreed that what we should do is find a neutral third party to do the acceptance testing on this project. We hired 2 independent companies, one independent lab, which I'm proud to say was CoreDev in Seattle, Washington, where John Block worked, and the other one was a testing consultancy in Montreal called Testrix. We built a beautiful a set of requirements, so with the customer we agreed that that's what they cared about. The independent consultant built the beautiful test environments and scripts and all this type of stuff, and we did what was high stakes acceptance testing. In the Dropbox, you're going to see beautiful, beautiful examples of things that were compromises that were made. We even had, the deal was so important for the customer that we had arbitration in case we disagreed about a bug. And the arbitration group was defined. And we ran the tests, we have the iterations of it, we have all the stuff that came out. And we did find problems because there were concerns that we didn't know about when we developed the product that were customer specific. We addressed, we fixed this, we deployed the software, and we basically turned it around. We turned the whole thing around from they're dropping us, we've been sabotaged, the world is over, to we're the heroes. And we were the heroes, and we saved the day. And it was a wonderful experience to be on, but it was hard as hell to figure this out and to realize if you see someone sabotage your software and do something like that and generate reports and saying like there's 9,000 bugs in the system and it's a disk that was an intermediate build that was taken from a desk by someone, it's like, ugh! I hate that. But solved by value sync. Anyhow, case study in the Dropbox. If you want a copy, send me an email. Any other questions or comments? There was. I know that we're supposed to tease you guys right now because we're not going to give you drinks unless you ask lots of questions. Or maybe just one question.
Questions?
Well, this is a typical Estonian crowd. I'm proud of you guys.
There's a question in the front row and a question towards the middle there.
Oh, you ruined everything now.
Oh, the one in the front row is more interesting.
Okay.
42.
So I'm curious to understand, did you ever discover the reason of why that company that you acquired that had 200,000 customers?
200 customers.
200 customers and so many code bases have done it so in complicated way and not in the simple way? Like
Well, they basically were hired guns, and they started off with the model of development. Everyone heard that, right, because of the mic, so I don't have to repeat the question. So everyone over there was used to a very different business model. And so if you think about the history, they start off with 1 or 2 customers, and they're doing contract development. And then they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they never got the idea, hey, let's make a product, because they never knew. They never had a software engineering manager that knew anything about product development. They knew about coding and programming and stuff like that. And so at the beginning, it made a lot of sense, and they were just very successful at it. And then what's obvious is they didn't care about optimizing their software engineering process or their testing process. What they cared about was increasing the valuation of the company. Valuation of the company was guided by the number of customers and the amount of cash going on, not the type of software engineering going on. And so that's why we bought them, because we wanted the customer base. So it was really, we didn't do any audit of the software engineering. We were stupid. We made serious mistakes in acquiring them without looking under the hood at their software process. But I think it's the history starting off with a couple and eventually very successful and focus on, I'm going to sell this company anyhow. So why optimize the process? Get the metric that they care about up, sales and total number of customers. The company was ABH.
Hey, so I've got a question about conflicts between values.
Yes.
So let's say you had a sales department that wants a thing to work in a particular way, and you've got another department that wants something to work in another way. The same functionality, for example. How would you deal with those kinds of conflicts with regard to?
So I have several first-person experiences that address that, but I don't have a generalized answer. So I don't want to appear to generalize here. However, what I've done in almost every case is I forced the conflict at the stakeholders level to happen before we got too deep into the project. So I try to bubble it up, and I do that by getting my stakeholders to buy into my workflow. So let's say I have a workflow. make a little baby state model. Here's how I'm going to prioritize my work. And I make a little one for requirements, a little one for tests, a little one for things, just simple things. And I show the stakeholders. And if they disagree, I want that to bubble up at that time, force the fight between them before I get anywhere near the project. I've successfully done this at companies that do a financial management, and their stakeholders really want to hold their grounds, but they want the project to get going. I won't start the project unless the workflow about how to prioritize my testing and my requirements is agreed upon by my stakeholders. So if they disagree, I force it as early as I can in the project. Of course, if I don't discover the stakeholder until later, it's a lesson learned for next time. I don't have a magic solution. I'm sure you've dealt with similar things, so. Yeah, but every case is a little bit different, and a lot different in some cases. There's in the back, a question? Thank you. Thank you.
Carles.
Talk more afterward. Hello in the back.
Hello. Not on. It is on. At first you said that your personal opinion about quality didn't matter.
Rob Sabourin's personal opinion about quality does not matter.
Then you switched to another slide where you talked about that the opinion of the test lead.
Subjective opinion of the test lead,
did matter to someone.
Yeah, but that's not their view of quality. That's in the case I gave you, it was the subjective assessment of the test lead about issues related to what critics would say or issues what customers say. So it did matter. You're right, it did matter. And maybe my rhetoric could use a little bit of refinement on that. But that status report for that, I'll include a copy in the Dropbox if you want to see it. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful example. And still, that team was using a concern of, and a sort of value view of quality that wasn't theirs, that was from their stakeholders. It wasn't like the test lead came in and was hired because they have a certain view of quality. The test lead, who is actually Adam White, if anyone knows him, he basically went in there and sort of found out what do people care about. And then let's drive testing to help address those type of issues. So he actually was quite concerned about their view of quality. But his opinion, so my opinion of what the guy would say was true, and he's guessing, right, what would someone say. So I think that it's probably less black and white than I like to present it. But you're very, very right to make that point, and I thank you.
Hi. You said you had the Dead March project and you were called in to make it work.
In November.
Yes, but you actually didn't. You just made the right decision by stopping that project and create a new one because you completely threw out everything they were done and just started a new one, getting the user stories. No,
not really. We didn't do any new development. We took the code bases they had that didn't integrate well, and we just threw it together, and it was sloppy crap. And we basically carved it a little bit like Michelangelo talks about the marble. You know, we take the piece of marble out, and I see there's a statue in there, and I carve out the garbage, and eventually I get the statue of David. I'm not proud of that software. I think it was really lousy software, but we did the job, and we got things done good enough. We did start with that crap, but we focused on it. So we didn't even gray out unused options. There was all sorts of stuff in there when we first released it that was really, really dangerous, but we trained the people to avoid it, and then came out with, for almost a year afterwards, right? They came out with dot releases every month, removing this ancillary functionality and stuff. So, the case study is documented in an article called Testing Under Pressure, which is in the Dropbox, where I get in a lot more detail about it. But you're absolutely right to bring that up. We didn't write new code. We took that ugly stuff and we chiseled out the marble that was not David, and we get something nice afterwards. And the product eventually was usable, but nowhere near what you would never like to make that software. It's yuck, yuck, lousy software. Ugh. It also used Object Delphi. Yeah. Sorry.
Horrible. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, guys.
Don't leave just yet. I've got a little something for you. So now you can as well become an Estonian e-resident.
Thank you.
The instruction is here in the box.
Okay.
Thanks for coming all the way from Canada.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy your drinks. Okay. Do you want me to open it?
No need.
Okay.
You can just-